Maybe walk us through the history of data in a bit more depth. And I would love to see kind of what you think are pivotal moments and milestones in the history of data that has led to the paradigm shift that we're in today.
Yeah, sure. That's great because, we sort of look back in order to look forward. I mean, our approach to history is a very sort of instrumental approach. We want to learn from the past in order to sort of learn how to ask the right question for what's going on today. So that's very important because, of course, we are not historians, but we want to learn from history. And we do so by retracing, as you mentioned, pivotal moment in the sort of, I would say, in the role of data within society and the links between data, like social cognition, how do we understand the world, and institution. This idea that, how we organize, think collectively has a very close link to what kind of data we produced, how do we use them, how do we mobilize them? So we start with these clay tokens, these little sort of artifacts made of clay that had some shapes, like they were like cylinder shaped or different shape. They were stand for something, for instance, a ship or a day of work. And they were exchanged in the Mediterranean as a symbol, a token of a transaction. So, and that was the first moment in which that we know, of course, in which as transaction, exchange were recorded, they ceased to be only something that was happening in a given moment in time and in a given place, and they became something that could be extracted from that moment, thought as a social event, as a sort of objectified event upon which something else could be built, practices of taxation. Because I could record the exchange between me and you and I could encode it into a token and this token could be stored. Then, in a year time, I could recount how many transactions we made and I could extract like a tax, or something else. And of course, this was used exactly in proto-bureaucracies at the time. They were the temple, and effectively taxation was born almost by that. And I would say the most important thing was born by the manipulability of concepts, very complex concepts, such as exchanged, that were made objective, so to say, with a life on their own, because they could be encoded into data. The links between data and, the making or the emergence of institution are also recounted in another episode where we talk about the rise of statistics, the numeracy, which really signed a very important moment in history, because to the quantification of collective behavior is linked government and how do we govern such behavior, and therefore the making, if you want, of modern institution, of modern public institution, the state, that's very much linked to statistics, which is the science almost of the state. But this is also linked to data. So how do we gather data? How do we make those data the representation of some things that we start looking at a product of society that exists only insofar I can count these events. So it's a really, sort of a very interesting feedback loop here. I do measure society through the counting of some event, and for this reason, I almost make society as something representable and therefore governable. And this, I would say, is a second important moment. A third moment, and I go to US here, is the making of corporation, the emergence of modern corporation that the business historian Alfred Chandler's recount as the change when, these modern corporations had to use internal data in order to keep track of their goods, their resources. So think about the beginning of last century, or the end actually. So the end of the 19th century, think about modern railways, think about all this technology coming and this big corporation, the organization expanding, changing, changing places, changing also, diversifying also their operation, having to hire people. How do you suddenly track all these different goods and workers and way of working? So you need to start recording internal data. So that's the idea of Chandler. And as you keep on recording what the people that work for you do, how do they do that? Where do you locate goods, physical resources? Then you become a corporation. So you become a different kind of organization that can expand in scale and scope and, give rise to modern ways of doing business. And that's also very, very interesting because once again, from history, we learn that there is a link between, institutions, data, work practices. Chandler, for instance, links the emergence of managers, of clerks, to the use of data. The administrative science, is the science of data. And yes, I think that these three moments are very important. And then, of course, perhaps the last one, which is the most, perhaps relevant for us, is the advent of machines and how they change basically everything within organization. So first, the advent of machine, the Hollerith punch cards, and then the advent of computers as, digital data makers. And this is something that really first within organization and thereafter for us, for society at large, as has been a real pivotal moment. Data ceased to be, just linked to specific practices like, archival data to the archivist, or accountant data to accountants. But with digital technology, they become almost universal token where different things could be recorded, represented, manipulated, and also conjoined, made to, combined. And new things can be learned from this recombination of data that up until that point were belonging to different areas of work, of life. So yeah, I really like a fast walk through thousands of years. But it's so fascinating. I can talk for hours. You need to stop me here and tell me,
Yeah.
enough. But let's talk about that, something else.